call the Saline City Council meeting to order. If you please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before I conduct a roll call of members, I want to begin this evening with a moment of silence. I was notified by my colleague, Mr. Gearbaugh, prior to tonight's meeting, that our longtime county treasurer, Catherine Hillary, has unexpectedly passed away earlier today. Catherine served as county treasurer for almost 30 years, and prior to that, she was county commissioner, dedicated public servant who contributed a large portion of her life, professional life, to the betterment of residents in Washington County. So I'd ask you if you join us at this time for a moment of silence in honor of the life of Catherine Hillary, our late county treasurer. Thank you very much. Members present this evening are council members Gearbaugh, CO, Rice, Lesh, Harmount, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, and Mayor Morrow. From city staff, we have City Manager O'Toole, Clerk Royal, Deputy City Manager, City Treasurer Cole, Parks and Rec Director Lambert, Wastewater Treatment Superintendent Briggs. Is he with us this evening? I don't believe he is. But we do have Community Development Director. Our Community Development Director is with us as well, Mr. Adkin. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended, noting there was one addition made between Wednesday afternoon and earlier today, and that's business item. She doesn't have a number at the present time. It's well number 5 backup generator that was added earlier today in light of some recent events. So unless there are additional amendments to the agenda, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended. I'll let Lesh be the mover on that and Dillon be the second. All those in favor of approving the agenda as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. There are no absences this evening. Those of you who are in the audience tonight, we welcome you. We encourage you to sign in on the back table to my left. There are also copies of the agenda on the back table, along with hearing devices if you require them. At this time, we come to the first public comment period, which is limited to agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any person may come forward at this time, make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested, but of course not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments on agenda items? Please come to the podium. I'm assuming, Chris, Ben, the microphone there is working? Okay, good.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm Sal Randazzo, Hickory Lane in Saline. I'm here today to talk about the water bill that you're going to be talking about, raising the rates on the water. I paid my water bill today. It was due today. It was $1,056.66. I have a garden. I have 5 55-gallon capture for rainwater. We have chickens to try to save money on food. We grow vegetables to try to save money on vegetables. And, you know, I speak for myself, but as I talk to other people around town, many of them say they agree with the things that I write on the Post. And, you know, I look at the housing stock in Saline, and I see it as just being middle class or lower middle class. And I really don't know how you can continue to raise the water rates in town. It's very helpful, especially now that I'm older. My wife and I are both on Social Security. We don't have pensions. We don't have savings. We're just trying to stay in the house that we've been in for 37 years. We raised 5 children here, and 2 of my boys were born in the home. So the home has a very much sentimental value to us. We want to remain here. We want to die in place. So I don't know how you can continue to raise the water rates. I see water rates around. Also, I want to say the quality of the water is terrible. And as a monopoly utility providing me water, I mean, the rust in the water, you can look in my toilet tanks, you can see my water tank, which is my hot water tank, which is a high efficiency one that we invested in to save money. It's full of sediment. My actual toilet bowl, I've found, is so calcified on the rim around it that it won't allow the water to come out and make a proper flush. And that's a fact of the hard water. And I know the city invested in soft water And I thought that would be a revelation and a great thing, but the water doesn't seem to be soft anymore. Just lots of rust, lots of calcification. I don't know how the city's not liable as a provider of a utility for the difficulties that I'm having with the water. So I would just ask, as I sit here, just as a community resident, and I see how money is spent, $70,000 to take a look at the fire department and $100,000 for a third set of eyes.
Recently completed. That too could be critically damaged or destroyed by the flash flood, which would descend on it if the dam failed. The next 2 pages show the flood of 1968, which broke the Saline Dam and resulted in major flooding in Curtis Park. The next page shows the Saline Reporter again, showing in 1973 the Saline Dam was a focus of Mayor Hubert Beach, who campaigned on fixing the dam, and he's pictured by the new construction of the dam. The very last page shows FEMA's floodplain map for Saline. It's its current floodplain, so if we were to remove the dam, all those floodplains would expand. I do believe there needs to be something there to prevent catastrophic flooding. The cost to widen all of our floodplains to accommodate removing the dam would be far more burdensome than paying to rebuild, repair, or reinforce the dam. And it's been done multiple times before to preserve the area around the Saline Dam, and probably won't be the last time, considering we have to deal with the flooding as precipitation levels are increasing globally with every year. I would rather we invest in a solution than trying to remove the dam and possibly repeating the hardships of our predecessors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Appreciate your comments. Thank you for the supplemental material as well. Are there any additional citizen comments on agenda items? Then I would defer to the city clerk. Clerk Royal, were there any written comments provided in advance of tonight's meeting in which the individual wanted their remarks read at this time? Easy enough. Then we will proceed to the first of 3 presentations this evening. First up are our annual 2024 Green Thumb Awards. And I would invite the Parks and Rec Director forward. Sunshine, you may use the cordless mic. And I believe you also have maybe the chair of the Parks Commission with us. And we do. One Parks Commissioner, 2, 3, actually I think we have 4.
We have several Parks Commissioners here this evening.
Majority of the Parks Commission. So
We do have, yeah.
Ms. Rice is the council liaison of the Parks Commission. If you'd like to join your colleagues up front.
Thank you. Yeah, we have several members of our Parks Commission, so thank you. Several in the audience. I would like to recognize really quickly Jill Estrada and Tim Dallett. They took the lead on our Green Thumb Awards this year. So they were very busy going out in the community, taking lots and lots of pictures and getting all the materials ready for us to vote on. The Green Thumb Award is I think it's a gem. I think it's something really special that we do here. And it's because we recognize all the hard work that our community members put into their gardens and their spaces. Jill's going to talk a little bit about our new category. We had our residential beautification, our business and organization, and then we did a new category.
So this year we added a new category. It's the native and sustainability category, which acknowledges gardeners who incorporate native plant species into their gardens, as well as those who provide habitat for pollinators and other wildlife, and who incorporate other sustainable gardening methods, such as using rain barrels, installing rain gardens, using compost bins, things like those. So we started this new category just to acknowledge those gardeners.
Thank you so much, Jill. So that was a new addition to this program, and we incorporated the help of several members of the Environmental Commission, so that was a nice collaborative effort. This year we had over 32 nominations between the 3 categories, and tonight we're going to bring those winners up. It was very difficult to decide, as it is every year, because there's just so much to look at, and everybody has such creativity, and they've put so much time and effort into it. And I know, and I'm sure I can speak for all of us, that as we're walking our dogs or taking the kids for a walk or just strolling around the neighborhoods, it really makes our community a better place. So yeah, I think that's all that I wanted to say about that. We'll get started. So our first area, and I'm going to turn this over to Jill. So Jill's going to talk about the business and organizations, and then she's going to talk about the winners for the native and sustainability, and then Tim's going to announce the winners of our residential. And then when you're now, if you want to come up along here, Jill, if you want to grab those. Yep.
All right, so I'll start out with the businesses and organizations. So we only received 3 nominations this year, which was down from previous years, but all 3 businesses did such a great job with their gardens that we wanted to acknowledge them with kind of unique awards. So the first business is IMI Saline Recreation Center. I believe we have Brian Snyder and Josh Jeffers here. So this is the Recreation Center, and they are being awarded with the Community Cultivation Award for Best Use of Volunteers. And this is acknowledging the dedication and hard work of the many volunteers that we have who have been working really hard to keep the Recreation Center garden looking beautiful and welcoming. All right, and the next business is Mill Pond Manor. I believe we have Chris Ridings and any residents that may have come with you. And they are being awarded the Landscape Masterpiece Award for Outstanding Garden Design. And our last business is Lily's Flowers. Unfortunately, I don't think anyone could be here on their behalf, but they are being awarded the Color Bloom Award for creative use of color. And so we'll make sure they get their award. Moving on to the Native Sustainability category, we collaborated with the Environmental Commission for judging on this. So we looked at of course, the incorporation of native species as well as other sustainable gardening methods. So the first winner is Zena Ealavega. I hope I said your name right. And that's 202 Russell Street, and these are some pictures of her beautiful rain garden. And our second winner is Angelica Avellaneda Leva. I'm sorry, I butchered it. And while they're taking the picture, just a quick note on their garden. They also incorporated many different native species. They also used a compost bin, which reduces food waste and improves the soil. And they used straw as mulch to retain water. So they used many different sustainable methods. And then I'll hand it over to Tim for the residential.
Hey, good evening. First winner is not with us tonight, I don't believe, but Carol Weissner. I don't believe she's with us tonight. Okay, we'll move on to the next. Over at Springbrook Court, we've got Jeanette Brenner. Very nice landscaping. Is Jeanette with us? There you are. All right, now I get a chance to butcher a name. Off of West McKay Street, I'm going to say this wrong, but it's John Thomas and Michael Forstnell? Close enough? Thank you. Yeah. Over on Harper Road, we have Sarah Wybush. Over on Calder Court, we have Janice and Grant Burnett. And lastly, they're not here, but I've got Becky Fox off of Willis Road. And closing, just like a big applause for all the winners. Did a great job. We appreciate your effort.
Thank you all. Congratulations to our winners. Thanks to Parks for being here. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's nice. Oh, that was very nice. Thank you all. We are going to keep moving along, and the second presentation is our annual audit, so the 2024 fiscal year audit presentation. We have some guests from Plant Moran. We would invite you forward to the podium. You may begin the presentation whenever you're ready. The PowerPoint appears to be up on the screen. Would you like to begin with some comments, Deputy City Manager Cole?
Yes, if you don't mind, so Mayor, thank you very much. If you want to go ahead and flip to the first slide. Oh, actually, I forgot we did it a different way. Okay, wonderful. Well, not to spoil the results of the audit for anyone, much like you can spoil a good movie, but the results of the audit are that we are in a very fine position with our fund balance this year. In fact, it's at just a little over 36%. Far above the 25% limitation placed by our fund balance policy. Here we have listed numerous expenses that have happened that were planned for prior year that have happened for numerous different reasons in this year. Estimating probably just a little over of about $500,000 would be a full amount that we would need to designate, although that does have a little bit of play either way. Certainly as the fund balance policy designates, the city manager and I will come forward with suggestions on how different uses for capital projects and improvements, infrastructure needs, or lowering debt payments that we could provide as an option to reduce that fund balance percentage. Next, I wanted to, if you flip to the next slide. I'll talk a little bit about our sewer fund. While our fund balance for our general fund is still very healthy, our sewer fund is not without its obstacles. So noting here that we really have challenges in fiscal year 26 and fiscal years 27 for our cash flows. That's really the first year we have to make that big bond payment for the wastewater treatment renovation. And then the last thing I wanted to just talk about that we had brief discussions about here at City was the amount of allowable debt that the city is allowed to have. So this is limited by Michigan law. It's limited 10% of state equalized valuation. And today, after total valuation, we would be legally allowed to borrow an additional $47.5 million according to the calculation. And then the last thing I wanted to just briefly discuss with everyone is while we do have challenges in our water and sewer funds, we certainly are putting our best effort forward to create savings. So you'll see here that the water and sewer replacement funds are pretty much growing steadily. We did have a little bit of a use in some of those replacement funds for some purchases during this year, so it did reduce a little bit in water. But we are committed to bringing that right back up to its balance within the year. And with that, I would like to turn the presentation over to Martin and Steve from Plant Moran. Martin Olenek is a partner with Plant Moran, and then Steve, I don't know what your current title is, manager with Plant Moran. So I would like to introduce them and invite them to come talk about this year's audit.
Thank you for having us this year to present the audit. At first, I thought the crowd was here for us, but I'm a little heartbroken. Just want to say that. But there's a handful of documents that are in front of you that we wanted to talk about. Some documents we're going to cover in a lot less depth than others. The thickest of the documents is the financial statement. I did pass out the updated versions today, this evening. The only difference from the council package that you would have received is just a draft watermark. Numbers, everything else stayed the same. So just wanted to point that out for all the documents. So the thickest of the documents, Stephen's actually going to cover in graphical form, just to kind of talk about the changes over the prior years. The couple pages that I did want to mention is on page 1 and 2 is the actual opinion letter. That is the only part of the document that belongs to Plant Moran. And in that, it basically says it's an unmodified opinion, which in regular terms, I would say it just basically means you can rely, based on our testing, you can rely on the numbers that are presented to you. That means you can budget, based on those numbers, you can rely on those the historical numbers that are within. A couple of the documents there's a couple of letters, including the federal awards, supplemental information document. I will cover those after the graphs are presented by Stephen. I did want to mention too, as Stephen's going through the presentation as well as I'm going through the letters, feel free to stop us if you have any questions, or we can hold off until the end as well, whatever your preference is. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen.
Thank you. So we'll just walk through these graphs, which really just cover some of the highlights of the financial statements at a pretty high level. And we'll start with looking at the general fund, in particular the general fund revenue. So this first graph shows the general fund's revenue over the last 5 years broken out by category. And we can see that if you're looking between 2023 and 2024, they're mostly consistent from last year overall. You'll see a decrease in the intergovernmental category. That was just due to revenue recognized last year related to ARPA that was spent in fiscal year 23, so the revenue was recognized at that point. And then you'll also see an increase in the other sources category, which is primarily related to higher investment income this year. We could go to the next slide. This is a similar graph, but this will be the expenditures for the general fund, so broken out by category over the last 5 years. Again, overall pretty consistent year over year between fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24. There was an increase you'll see in the general government category, mainly related to capital costs. And then you'll also see a decrease in the other category, and that's just related to there were land purchases and some storm drain capital costs in that category last year. That drove it up temporarily. If we go to the next slide. So this graph shows the history of the general fund's fund balance going all the way back to 2014. So for each bar, the yellow portion of the bar represents the unassigned fund balance of the general fund. Then the gray portion represents the portion of fund balance that is designated for specific future uses, whether that's committed or assigned or restricted. Usually fund balance did increase this year, and a large portion of that is allocated for future expenditures. That's all broken out in note 12 of the financial statement, so you can see specifically what those categories are. If we go to the next slide. This slide shows the 6-year history, 6-year comparison of capital expenditures. So moving beyond just the general fund now. So this is broken out into, you can see different portions of the bars represent general fixed assets, water and sewer, or highways and streets. So you can see capital expenditures did increase quite a bit this year, and most of that is in that green portion of the bar, the water and sewer portion. That's related to the wastewater treatment plant projects, water mains, sewer projects, things like that. Go to the next. Yep. So this next graph shows just a breakout of property tax collections by the city, and really just covers all of the different millages that the city collects, and you can see that broken down underneath the chart as well, which lists out what each of them are. A vast majority of these are going to be collected by the city on behalf of other taxing authorities like the schools or the county. So you'll see the total of 67.5 mills about. Only about 18 mills of that actually stays with the city. The rest gets passed through to the other taxing authorities. This next graph just shows how the mills levied by the city of Saline compare to Saline's neighboring communities. So Saline is represented by the red line on this graph. So you can see it's tracking very closely with other neighboring communities, primarily Milan and Ann Arbor. Go to the next one. This graph shows the results for the Recreation Complex Fund. So it shows the revenue and expenditures in that fund for the fiscal year. So overall activity in that fund was largely similar between fiscal year 23 and 24. And it had, you'll see on the row for net, there was a revenue exceeded expenditures by about $335,000. That's before a contribution from the general fund of $396,000. So the next graph shows a similar graph, but for the water fund. So revenue for the water fund was largely consistent with prior year. Sales were up just about 5%. And expenses were up about 11%, and much of that was due to depreciation, as well as just other operating costs. And the water fund did have operating income of about $695,000. Go. Same graph here for the sewer fund. In the sewer fund, revenues were up, similar to the water fund, about 5.5%, and expenses were up about 10% over prior year. So that sewer fund had operating income, you'll see, of about $2.2 million. And this last graph shows the unfunded cost for the pension and OPEB plans, and really represents the impact that the assumptions used to calculate those liabilities can have. So first, starting with pension. So the net pension liability did decrease this year from $12.5 million to the $11.4 million that you'll see on the bar on the far left. And then the next bar just shows that if the city were to decrease the discount rate assumption that is used to calculate that liability by just 1%, it would increase the liability by about $3 million. Now with pension, you don't have a lot of control over those assumptions because those are set by MERS, but just shows the impact that those can have. And then on the OPEB side, so OPEB is actually sitting in a net OPEB asset position, so it is more than 100% funded by about $1.2 million after, as of 6/30. And similar to the pension side, it just shows if you were to change the retiree health care trend rate assumption by 1%, it would flip that to about a $581,000 liability. So again, just reiterating that this just shows that both plans, they are both doing well, just shows the importance to get those assumptions right because it can have a major impact on what ultimately gets reported. And with that, I'll get back to Martin.
A couple of things right before I start covering the letters and other items. A couple of things that I feel like, a lot of times the question is, how's the city doing just overall financially and, especially like long-term planning, et cetera. And the last couple of slides, I feel that, really paint a really good picture of a couple of things I really want to point out. So first is the pension and the OPEB plans. So the OPEB plan is overfunded, which is definitely something that you should be very proud of. A lot of communities are not, and I would say it probably puts you in the top 10%, if not even higher, of communities that where you're at with the OPEB plan. With that said, you can probably stop making contributions to the OPEB plan, maybe consider making more contributions to the pension plan. The pension plan is about middle, like a little higher than 60%, 65% funded, which is in a good spot as well, relatively speaking. The state mandates at least it's 60%, so you are over that threshold. I would always say try and be a little bit higher. I would probably say about 70 or 75% should be the goal, just from the perspective that if there's a dip in the market or something like that, that can have a negative impact on the percentage that you're funded and actually dip below 60%. So it's just something to keep an eye out for. And as Stephen mentioned, a lot of the data that the actuary uses in order to calculate the liability, et cetera, the discount rates, they have a significant impact on the overall liability, net liability. So something to keep an eye out for. In the previous slide, that was the sewer fund. So even though there was income for the year for 2024, it looks like the fund's doing great. However, you have clearly a significant project that's being undertaken. And with that, even though you were able to add to the fund balance, there's a significant debt payment that's going to be due next year and so on. So it's something that was needed to be done in order to have that cash so you can meet the debt obligations. So just something to point out overall. With that, the other item that I did want to point out is, as I mentioned earlier, the federal award supplemental information letter report. So this year, since your overall expenditures related to federal funded grants were over $750,000, we had to do extra procedures in order to calculate or kind of analyze if you were in compliance with the grant. And I did want to point out that it may be one of the shortest reports you'll see. And essentially on the last couple of pages basically says that there were no findings, there were no material weaknesses, there was nothing associated with that. There is one item that I did want to point out on the backside too, is that it discusses if the entity is a low-risk auditee, and it says no. And the reason it says no is because in the last couple of years, you've not been under or through that same audit. So if you go through the audit a couple of years in a row and there's no findings, then you become a low-risk auditee. So it doesn't mean you did anything wrong, it's just you weren't subject to the audit in the past. And then the last letter that I wanted to point out is the post-audit letter. So basically, it's the bookend to the pre-audit letter that you received, which you can see accountants are very innovative with the wording that's used. So the post-audit letter discusses basically the process for the audit. The first section talks about just if there was any disagreements with management, any findings, any journal entries as a result of our testing in order to make sure that your statements are in accordance with accounting guidelines, et cetera. So the letter, I would say, is very boilerplate. There is no findings or anything like that, so I do want to say thank you so much to the city for keeping the records in very good order. I know it's a very big task to maintain all the, like the dollars coming in and making sure you're in accordance with the accounting regulations. So I do want to say thank you to the city, to the treasurer, just overall her team, et cetera, in order to make sure that the records are in really good order. The second section of the letter are just legislative items and informational items. And those are basically applicable to most communities within the state of Michigan. And majority of the items talk about upcoming GASB pronouncements, including one that's coming due next year for updating the calculation for compensated absences. We've already talked to the city a little bit about that, and we'll definitely be able to help out with implementing the new standard. And then the very last GASB that's coming out is in a few years, new financial statements. Basically, the presentation's likely going to change to what the thickest of the documents that you have in front of you looks like. Again, we'll be working with the city in order to make sure that you're in compliance with all that. So with that, it concludes our presentation. Happy to address any questions you may have. And as I said earlier, I just want to say thank you to the city for all the help throughout the audit. I know that on a daily basis, the schedules are already full, and then auditors come in for a few weeks, and we ask for a lot of data, a lot of information, et cetera, and it just creates probably a backlog to everything else. So just want to say thank you so much.
Martin, Steve, we appreciate your time. Hang tight, because I'm sure there will be questions that you can address. Again, I would defer to the deputy city manager for our guests or for city staff.
I just have to comment that, like Councilmember Harma, this is my first go-around with the city audit. I've seen members of your firm with the Saline schools, but the schools are kind of a completely different animal as far as infrastructure and things. Being a new council person, seeing the large numbers that are looming in the distance for our debt service, I was a little apprehensive, but seeing your graph, helps put along with the cash flow from our city treasurer, it helps calm my nerves a little bit for the time being. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, gentlemen. Again, I would defer to city staff. Any final comments you'd like to make at this time before we transition to the next subject? Gentlemen, anything else you'd like to add?
Just want to say thank you so much for the cooperation throughout the audit, and just again, thank you so much for being able to help the city with doing the work as well.
Very good.
Thank you so much.
The partnership and the collaboration. Thank you very much. And as it relates to the unassigned fund balance, that is an issue that the city council will revisit in the next 30 to 60 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If there are no additional comments pertaining to the 2024 audit, we will transition then to the third and final presentation this evening, which is Downtown Public Gathering Space Partnership, and the Deputy City Manager, City Treasurer Cole will begin the presentation.
Good evening. Thank you so much. Maybe not. Can you hear me okay? Okay, wonderful. There are a couple things that we all do know. We know that a downtown space, a gathering space, a community space for our residents would be so meaningful because these initiatives really spark a lot of private sector growth and infuse our shared spaces with warmth and vibrancy and welcoming energy for the city of Saline. And as far back as 2007, I can find some documents that state that this community gathering space is something that City of Saline residents want, and it has continued like all throughout the rest of these years that it is a persistent request that we have a community downtown space. So I would like to invite Tyler Kinley up. He will be coming to speak with us about our downtown space. So I invited Tyler Kinley to come and speak with you tonight about an opportunity. As he and I met this summer and spoke a little bit about a community space, he shared with me his plans and that he's working with the MEDC. So I wanted to go ahead and open it up to you, Tyler, as soon as we get the presentation working, which it looks like it's up and going.
So, Mr. Kinley, you may begin when ready.
All right.
Well, thanks, everyone. We've got ourselves going here. We can go to the next slide. I appreciate everyone's time. So as led in here, it's been clear. I've been a part of the Saline community for a long time. To back up again, Tyler Kinley. I'm here representing Praxis Properties. We own and manage Murphy's Crossing in downtown Saline, as well as Merchant Square Building. And the reason I'm here is because I've been watching as the Saline community has been saying that they're interested in a downtown community gathering space. I watched as the notion that we see here was contemplated this summer, and frankly, I think it looks amazing. I would love for it to happen. I also saw it met with some pushback from stakeholders, residents, and at the time, in parallel and completely separate from this, I and we at Praxis have been working on a project on Murphy's Crossing. If you've been there, you've seen behind it, there's a green space that's undeveloped. 1995, my dad, Bill, behind me here, redeveloped Murphy's Crossing, and that space was planned to be a third building. It wasn't developed because of market conditions. Since then, I've been looking at that space, wondering what we could do. We've always considered it to be the spot for a third building. The challenge is what to put in the building that would work financially. The challenge is if we put an office building there, the office market is tough. It would take probably quite a time to fill. Retail is also good, but it's hard to put retail on upstairs floors, and really the only remaining option would be residential. Residential could work. The challenge is parking. If we were to put in 24 to plus units, we would need to find a place for them to park, and if they were to live there, they would want a place to park nearby. Seeing the challenges in parking downtown, it didn't seem politically feasible for us to move ahead with that and request parking. I mean, I could even see our tenants, some of whom are in the audience, saying we wouldn't really be in favor of that. We need parking. So as I thought about it and looked at the space and saw the community's desire for a gathering space, it started to seem like there could be a potential there. For the past year, I've been working on that type of a development for downtown, something that could work even without putting in a new building, just finding a development opportunity within the building that's there. For those of you who don't know, above the Kerrigan Cafe and Cobblestone Road space, it's actually vacant. It's fully vacant. Above there, it is remaining to be developed, and the reason is because its distance from the egress, meaning the stairwell and the elevator, it is a distance too far to continue to develop. We would need to provide another means of egress. That was going to become or to be from the third building. Since it's not there, it remains undeveloped. So I've been working with the MEDC to consider what could we do. The MEDC is a state-funded program, or it's the MEDC, but they have state-funded programs that for communities like Saline that don't have the rental income of, say, a Detroit or Grand Rapids or even in Ann Arbor right now where rents are skyrocketing. It provides that gap funding that they pay for some of the construction costs to bring down the costs so that you can rent at the community's level. So we've been working with them for over a year now, and they're very supportive of us. They love the notion of bringing residential into downtown cores. They love the notion of revitalization, so we're also contemplating on the lower level a cocktail bar. We've been in talks with a potential tenant there. And as we've been working through this, that back area I was looking at and thinking, this could really be something special, similar to the downtown community gathering space that Celine's been talking about. At one point, I was even approached by a neighbor, Ron Schofield, owner of SALT, and he presented an idea, hey, Tyler, you should put in some sort of a space back here. And I said, Ron, I love it. I've actually got plans just like that. We talked and we looked at plans. Cole was also there. And as she saw the plan, she said, this could actually work. As we talked more about it, it could even be enjoined to currently city property to create something that's similar in size. You can see the two squares here to the previously considered community gathering space. It could be comparable. The MEDC's funding for this could also be leveraged. They will fund up to 50% of the construction costs of the project in order to make it financially feasible. If the city were to be involved in this, they could also see their funds matched dollar for dollar. So tonight, the purpose of this presentation is not to say we need this money for the city, we need the city to be a part of it, but more to say we're looking to do this on our property, and if the city would like to be a part of it to meet the needs that the community has defined, we'd be happy to talk through it. And today, the notion would be this is a presentation for you to learn about it, hear from me, and also present questions, because as we go forward and start to consider it, there's going to be a lot to go through. If we go to the next slide, we can take a look at the area that we're talking about. The two buildings that are more defined, those are Murphy's Crossing. The surrounding buildings are our neighbors, the parking lot to the bottom right, and the area outlined in red is the potential area that could be used. Now I can tell you, right now it includes part of the driveway that connects the access between Councilmember Gearbaugh's property and the bank that actually connects to the parking lot. And I've already heard from one of my tenants, hey, don't get rid of that. I need that for drop-offs. And I can tell you, the reason we've left this blank is because it is a blank canvas upon which we can create what we want. Right now you can see there is a dividing line as well. That's the property that is adjacent to Murphy's Crossing is what we own and manage. That would be, if the city were not to be involved, that's what we would be working with. We would look to do something similar to this, where if you see on the back, there are two walkways that connect to the back of Murphy's Crossing to, you can see the stairwell, that's the center building. That's the key to providing ingress and egress for the apartments that would go to the top left of that building. I can go into great detail. My only failing here is I often overtalk with these things. I want to make sure there's time for questions, and I know you've got a long agenda tonight. But I simply wanted to bring this as a presentation so that you can start to understand what we're talking through, and also a bit of the timing. So you can go to the next slide as well. Here's a rendering of a concept. Now, the reason I show you this is because this is a bit of architects gone wild. When we talk about this at the beginning stages, we say, what could we do? And they love to do architecture and design and come up with plans. Now, the only thing I can guarantee is it won't look like this. It'll look something different because this elicits a lot of reactions, and it's supposed to do that. It's supposed to draw attention to, hey, I don't like this. Like, okay, well, let's not do that. Or I love these things. Okay, let's do that. And I know from the work that you've already put in to the community gathering space this summer, you have a really good idea of what you'd like to see in a space, of what the community would like to see in the space. That work has been done, and it can be leveraged to this space or to that space or whatever space you want to do. It's very usable. In this case, we can build on that and try to incorporate any or all the features that are interested in having into something here. So again, this is the space that we own and manage, and we plan to go ahead with a project that will add apartments downtown. It will add hopefully a cocktail bar in the lower level and some level of features to our green space. Now, the green space doesn't generate income, so it's hard to fund much there. That would be a part of what we're thinking if the city were to be involved and join it with city property. It could be enlivened and rejuvenated and revitalized and hopefully provide a place for people to go downtown and enjoy being there. But again, it's an opportunity, and I welcome questions. I'd love to hear initial thoughts, because after tonight, we will try to either move ahead and consider working together, or if there's no interest, great. We have a different path, and we'll go ahead and still work with the MEDC on the project. But the goal of tonight is to give you an understanding of what we're considering and what's on the table. Have I missed anything? Fairly clear? Okay, so I think with that, we can open up for some questions. I mean, there's a whole list of next steps going forward, some of the next steps to consider. I mean, we would want some sort of agreement on how it's managed, how the money is spent, what money goes to where, what features we get. A lot of these things we don't have a current great answer for, because in order for us to move ahead on on surveys of the site, on surveys of the city site, on working with our landscape architects, Beckett and Rader, on design concepts, if the city is uninterested, then that gives us a direction to work on our site. But if I hear tonight, like, hey, we'd really like to see what this could look like, then we'd start to spend the money up front to do those studies, to do that analysis, and come back with something. Timing-wise, that's really one of the crucial pieces here, is the MEDC's RAP grant, it's revitalization and placemaking. That's currently open and rolling. And so they already have 2 applicants within their system that they're likely going to award money to. They have, I think it's $6 million that remain from the slightly over 7 that are dedicated to our area. Holden Branch is our representative. He and I have been working closely. He's already taken what I've put together, including some renderings, numbers, pro formas, and taken it up the ladder. And basically, at the first stage, he takes it up to his bosses at the Michigan Strategic Fund, and they say, yes, let them know to continue, or we're not even going to consider this. We've already passed the first hurdle of they're very interested. They love the notion, because it's trying to do the exact thing within the name. It's trying to revitalize, and it's trying to create a place for downtown Saline. But those applications are rolling, and we want to get in quickly. And so what we'd love to do is hopefully by the next council meeting, have a direction, yes or no, or even after this one. If it's no, then we have our direction. That gives a little bit of the overarching and idea and framework within which we're working. So without belaboring, I guess I'd open it up for questions and comments.
Very good. Deputy City Manager Cole, any additional comments you'd like to make at this time?
I think that the one thing that I would like to just point out here is that as we wrap this up, this is really an opportunity where we just want to know, is there interest for us to kind of vet some of these things out to a further degree, where when we're coming back in January, that would get you to a place where you felt very confident in your decision that you were making. What things would you want us to look at? What would you like to see? We have already obviously vetted out a downtown gathering space. Previously, we've paid consultants to do that. That work does not go for naught. That's very valuable. The same things apply to this project or to any project downtown for that matter. So those are the things that we're looking to from council tonight.
Very good. Yeah, let me echo those statements. I feel obviously it would be premature this evening to develop any real consensus on this issue. We want to provide you all an opportunity to raise questions and concerns and ask for additional items or amenities to be vetted and scrutinized further. This is an issue that we will revisit, and we'll also revisit the concept that was developed for the lot adjacent to the candy shop behind Brecken Grill that former Community Development Director Harrington presented on this past summer. I guess with that, Mr. Kinley, we appreciate, of course, your time and the effort that you've put into this. You've invested significant time and money, and we appreciate that very much. Thought the presentation was excellent. Again, provide everybody an opportunity to raise questions and concerns with the understanding that this item and the broader issue of creating a downtown gathering space will be revisited likely in early January. Can I start to my left with Councilmember Harmon? Either questions for city staff or for our guests this evening?
Yes, so thank you for your presentation.
Sure.
I appreciated getting a chance to visualize the space, and I have questions, so thank you for entertaining the questions. Can you bring up the decision matrix?
Yeah, I don't think that microphone is working, Councilmember Harmon. Let's pass.
Okay.
That's much better.
So on Wednesday of last week, I had a chance to meet and look at both spaces, previous space that we looked at behind, we want to call it the parking lot number 4 design, which is the normal space we have our, Summerfest, Oktoberfest, and we had some design concepts that we looked at. And then we looked at the space that Tyler had presented. And I just wanted to reiterate a couple of the things that we talked about because I don't know about the timing that you have down there. Did we get a confirmation that project's only going to take 2 to 5 years?
We did not get this. So this is a preliminary findings that we did as an example to show you the type of things that we could vet. And some of this was done based off the information from the surveys and findings from the original study. But if you wanted to get into further detail, we would have to do more vetting.
Yeah, I love this, kind of part of my idea, but one of the things, I think a couple things are really important here is one is that we have timing, right? So we've been talking about a space for Celine. It sounds like there is a timeline on whether or not we can get these funds or not get these funds or to move forward with this project. I do believe that the other project that we looked at, a couple other projects have been discounted, and then the other project seems like it's further out than 5 years to get permitted and get that. And there seems also to have been a lot of pushback from surrounding businesses for the support. So when we look at all the different decision criteria, clearly this one looks like it's a better option than the other ones. And I don't know what the timeline is that we need to move forward if we're going to have money and this is where we're going to put the money. It sounds like what's the drop dead date that we need to commit to whether or not the city of Saline is going to help support with the funds.
I think if we were to be able to commit funds in the January meeting, it would be an incredibly high likelihood we get awarded the grant. If we wait another meeting, that goes down, I would say, based on my conversations with Holden, it would go down a decent amount, I don't know, to 60%. And then with every meeting going forward, it decreases substantially. And that's because he's expecting more projects to come in and be awarded the money. And at a certain point, the MEDC actually opens it up and those funds no longer go to this area, they go to the general pool. And so that will include many more competitive projects and that money disappears quite quickly. So for the highest likelihood of receiving the funds, it would be next meeting.
All right, thank you.
Just so that they're clear on that, Mr. Kennedy, so next meeting being one of our meetings in January, excuse me.
Yes.
Actually, if I recall correctly, we have meetings back to back in January. because
Correct.
of the
Correct.
holidays. We actually meet on the first Monday, which I think is the 6th, and then the following Monday as well.
Oh, and I think the difference of a week is not going to make a big difference.
Any additional?
Implications during construction, about things of that nature?
Nobody loves to operate during construction. That's just a fact. But in my conversations with tenants, there has been overall support. But again, I would say what I'm working towards is making it work for everybody and taking tenant needs into account. So for instance, one of my tenants is here and she's made it very clear that it's important for her deliveries to be able to be made. And if they aren't, it's very challenging. And so that's one thing we'd like to make sure is incorporated, is that continued drive-through and a very easy path, which really is a goal of it. But that's the kind of thing that in the next bit, as we plan this out, we really want to incorporate. Now, I will say, I am talking to other neighbors that have skepticism and worry, and I think that that's expected. And it's something that, frankly, I think is going to come up. But as I've gone through looking at this, it's hard for me to think beyond the annoyance of operating during a period of construction. It's hard for me to come up with a why not yet. Because the same thing, if we do this and the city decides to incorporate it and fund part of it, it would basically preclude us from being able to develop the land going forward. There would be an agreement that it wouldn't be developed, that it would be used by the city. And so we would be giving up that use and that future development. And so it would still have to make sense for us to go forward. So, we are kind of pushing our chips in, saying we're in to do this if the city wants to be involved. And for the most part, I think a gathering space would be met with a lot of enthusiasm from our tenants, because besides events, it's fairly low impact and just beneficial.
In the future, yes, I agree with that statement fully. But during construction, we've seen in other areas like Brighton with their downtown redevelopment, and even when we had the Michigan Avenue project back in 2015, 2016, does put hardships on small business owners. So I'm thinking of, Kerrigan Cafe, for instance. Lots of construction going on upstairs, downstairs, all around
Sure.
the stairs. Are you as a business owner or as MEDC, willing and aware of some help that you can provide to tenants during those times where they may see some hardships in the intermediate while construction is happening? Yes, we all see the future benefits, but when you're talking about small business, a shift in 6 months can make or break a small business. So have you had any of those conversations with folks?
We haven't had conversations about what that could look like, but I can say that during COVID, there were long periods of time where we did not receive rent from tenants, and we worked with them to help them stay there. I mean, we're committed to keeping tenants active because it's to our benefit as well. It makes no sense for us to demand rent from a tenant that may be suffering and lose the tenant and have a vacancy. That's bad business, basically. So, we would be committed to helping them stay afloat.
I appreciate that. That's what I was getting.
Sure.
At.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't want to at the downfall of businesses that are established well and clean, for something that's in the future. So
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. I think just a couple of things that I think that we would need from our deputy city manager, treasurer, to kind of get some information out in front of council about the cost benefits. If there's anything from perhaps Celine Main Street on what something like this could bring into our community as far as economic development goes. I think, right now we're looking at an overall pretty picture, but I'd like to see some numbers in front of us on what, why is this worth this cost at this point in time?
Sure.
And, if those things look good, then I'm all about it.
Sure.
That's it.
Thank you, Councilmember Rice. Councilmember Gearbaugh?
Just to be fully disclosed, I have a financial interest in the property that although the city has ownership of it right now, there is a reverter clause in that property, and it's to be used only for public parking purposes, and as it was determined by the appellate court for handicap parking. This potential plan may trigger that. And as the community knows, and I know it's been 25 years, this was a significant issue that this is a project, and even this project primarily benefits one single property owner, as did back then. This moving forward, whether it might be a great idea for the city, I need to be very careful because I'm not sure how this is going to play out. And at this time, I will defer to my fellow colleagues because I will not give up my financial interest on this property. And knowing full well what happened in the past and the type of things that have been promised and have never followed through, this city needs to be very careful on where it invests its money.
Thank you, Mr. Gearba. Actually, I think the microphones are working down here, so you can hang on to that. Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, any comments or questions for either staff or the petitioner?
Thank you. Mr. Kinley had offered us a tour, like an on-site tour to kind of visualize it. And so I appreciated that to sort of see it in real time. I guess where I'm at right now is, and I was very frank with you when we met in person, that timing is everything. And right now, it's a big ask of finance when we're asking our residents to take a 7% year-over-year, utility rate increase. We're talking about the rec center in a deficit. We're talking about a lot of other things. So we need to look at the big picture too. It's absolutely 100%. We've talked about having a community space in this community for as long as I can remember. It's something it was actually the reason I was not going to move to Saline, because growing up on the East Coast, we had town greens. And that was a gathering place, and it was something I was accustomed to, and it was a very awkward thing to move to Saline and not have that. We've sort of made our way with it, but we've really seen that it's something we want to have here. We've looked at a lot of different options. We've looked at purchasing properties. We've looked at rehabbing currently existing things, and we've got this project of yours. The biggest difference I see right now is understanding the property itself. Who's going to own that property? Who's going to control that property? And that's the piece that I want to understand, because sometimes we get into that very gray area of, and I will use another piece of your property, which is Merchants Park, which is that walkway behind Dan's, if people don't know what that is, which the city leases from you. And for as long as I've been on council, I think we've done 3 rounds of building that space up into something, into a gathering space, a pocket park, whatever you want to call it. And it's never really worked out because there were too many moving parts of businesses that were, it was a place in which people had to pass through. It wasn't going to necessarily be. So what I want to understand is the same thing with this, is that you're looking at your preliminary drawings of having a business that's going to be utilizing a portion of this as their outdoor space.
Yeah.
And then we have a green space that's sort of still your property.
Yes.
Then we have an area which is the city property, which could theoretically be attached to your green space to make a bigger green space.
Yes.
So there's a lot of moving pieces there in understanding how that's going to work, of who's going to control it, who's going to be able to, is there going to be a master calendar of like, oh, you're hosting a wedding, or we want to have a picnic in the park, or what is that going to look like, of how that's going to be done, because it's not going to be a city-owned thing. And we already see that with Henny Field a bit, when we want to try to do it sort of, you have a lot of entities, because we've got the schools which own the property, and then you have other groups that want to utilize the property, and finding a way to sort of work together on that. The other thing that I want to understand is funding. When we talk about $250,000, $500,000, if the city theoretically were to give that money, is it going into the project for the development of the project? And it's a one-time give, Or are we talking about the city then leasing, because you're saying you're giving up your development rights to utilize that space. So then are you looking for supplemental income to offset that you're no longer developing that property, where we would be leasing that space from you to use it?
Well, I think the notion would be with the investment from the city, let's say it's $500,000, that would go towards the development of the exterior portion, not the exterior of the building, but the landscape entirely. And so it would pay for the connection and the unification, visually, of the property from the building out to the extent that you'd want of the city property. That would be where the money is spent. And frankly, we could allocate a certain portion to only be spent on the city portion to go only towards city benefit. And I'd be totally comfortable with that. To speak to your previous statement, we definitely would want a portion just outside the building for the use of the tenants. The tenants would want that. From there forward, we'd be willing to lease to the city as sort of a lease based on the investment from the city. That would be sort of part and parcel for the use of the rest of that green space. And the challenge here is, I think that we can come to an agreement on how to best do that. And I believe that's possible. And I'm nervous that the unknown of that right now might prevent the ability to have the kind of space that you didn't have here when you moved here. Like, I believe in the ability to work through that.
Okay. I just want to understand, though, that it's not a one-time financial give from the city. You're looking for a long-term lease. So on top of a give, you're looking for annual payments for X amount of years.
Oh, I would only be looking for the financial contribution. Let's just say it's $500,000. We could do it as a one-time gift, or it could be structured over a period of time. I would not be looking for a leasehold amount on top of that.
Okay.
And to be clear, like the Merchant Square lease is $1, and I think it's for 40 more years. Right. And so, like that one, it feels like it has not received a lot of attention because it's not a focal point. It feels more like a pass-through. And I think it is a challenge for council because it becomes a burden on you to have to either spend money or make decisions on something that it's hard to see, should we even do this? Whereas to me, the reason I'm even proposing this is because I think this has a much greater intrinsic value to the city.
The other thing is that we're talking in dollars when we really have a pie-in-the-sky conceptual idea. So we have no idea what the cost is going to be. So even if we were to say, all in, we're 500,000 into it, we have no idea what we're going to get for 500,000.
Sure, and having done cost estimating with Phoenix contractors to look at the building, we also looked, that's why we sort of did that kind of wild exterior just to see what we'd need to do. With a $500,000 contribution, that would equate to, with the MEDC match, essentially $1 million put into it. That would very easily cover any stormwater maintenance that we may need on the property. Anytime you put ground cover over what's already grass, you have to figure out where the stormwater goes. I've talked to Mr. Atkin about this on site a bit. We took a look at it. We felt like there are solutions, and based on that investment, we would be able to take care of that. We'd be able to do a number of groundscape aspects to our property that would leave, I think, over $500,000 for amenities and on the city property. I can't guarantee that, but we have looked into the costs here, and we do feel comfortable that we can create a pretty wonderful space.
And what is Praxis's contribution to the project? Financial contribution?
Well, we would have to work with our lender, which is Bank of Ann Arbor, to see what equity stake they'd need. But we are already probably $65,000 in. I imagine at the end of the day, it's going to be multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars.
So that's what you're looking at putting in. But to complete your part of the project, what is your cost going to be?
We'd have to go through all the financials right
Well,
now.
that's what I'm just trying to gauge, because in theory, the catwalks are on you anyway, because those should have been put in when the building was built, correct? Weren't those required to have
No.
rear entrances?
No.
So we just could have doors that drop off 2 stories?
Yes.
Okay.
They're not operable doors.
Um,
This is, the building's up to code. I mean, I guess I'm not sure.
I guess that was going back to sort of a lot of the issues that we had with the fire department and rear access and things like that. There were 2 aspects of that. Them having access to the building, but then also people having rear access to leave the building. So I guess just understanding that.
We're talking about the fire department's
Yes.
planning for rear access when it was initially developed?
No, just now, as we were talking about closing South Ann Arbor Street, there were
Right.
2 points that were brought up by the fire department. One was their having access to the building to extinguish a fire should they need to. The other point was I thought that there was an issue with not having rear exits.
No, there was never an issue with not having rear exits. The issue was that they couldn't pull the fire truck up to the back of the building.
Right. But I thought there was also that we had rear doors that didn't have exits from them.
I looked through his, I think, 24 points, and that was not one of them.
Okay, that's fine. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon. Mr. Seal, any questions or comments for staff or for the petitioner this evening?
I guess excuse me. First of all, I apologize for not having been able to be here for any of the walkthroughs so far. I've been out of town for one thing and another during the times when you folks were doing that. So I still have a lot of questions that I haven't answered, and it's largely due to my fault for not having been here to take advantage of the opportunities offered. I want to start off by saying that I certainly appreciate all the things that the Kinleys have done for the downtown. That whole block is, to a large extent, because of the kinds of efforts you folks have made in putting your time and effort and money into it and keeping quality towns there. That I think made this an attractive portion of the downtown. This strikes me, first of all, let me ask the question. From what I gather from the conversation, the MEDC money is about a 50-50 match with what we'd put into it.
Yeah, it provides gap financing, so it's up to 50% depending on the need, and the need comes from a pro forma that I've already created. So it's they're willing to match up to 50% in order to help make the project succeed and go forward.
All right, let me ask you this then, Tyler. How is this different than the alleyway we've talked about before, except it's larger? I mean, it's largely buried behind the buildings. It's adjacent to a parking lot. It's largely a walkthrough right now. Well, not a walkthrough now because there's not a whole lot of access down below there. But it would seem like it would be more of a walkthrough than maybe a gathering space or kind of a place where people would want to have any kind of an event. I'm not sure.
I'd love to take you out there. I think when you're standing on site, it would feel a little bit different from Merchant Park. Merchant Park is probably 2,000 square feet.
Based on the size.
And this in total, if we include the walk-through alley and the portion where Max uses to host tables, it's probably 10,000 square feet.
Okay. All right. So about 5 times.
Yeah, and I think it's, my background is in urban design and urban planning, and sometimes it's hard to quantify aesthetics, but I think the reason I've approached this the way that I have is because I really believe in it. And I think it's a part of an experience when you're on site that it's a nice place to be. That's why I've been working hard at this. Merchant Park is also nice, but it is intimate, it is small. If you host an event there, you're going to be right up against any performers or any public speakers. Here you have more room to spread out, but you're also adjacent to amenities that create activity. So you have a cafe, you have Mod Squad Hair, you have Max Restaurant, you have a cocktail bar, you have Cobblestone Rose providing amenities, you've got Salt next door, you've got a parking lot adjacent that can be utilized for parking or closed down, you've got a jeweler, you've got a bank. And these are all aspects of a downtown that create vitality and vibrancy. Further, the space itself sort of lends itself in a topography way to creating a sense of place. And that's, I think, what I'm seeing and hoping that others might see. But again, going back to Councilmember Dillon or others that have perhaps a level of skepticism, I think that that's very warranted. And I think it's worth potentially even going there with a notion in hand to see, like, does this make sense? Is this something that we want to see in the city? Because I think, just like Councilmember Dillon said, the city could use something like this downtown. And I loved the plan that Ben Harrington put forth this summer. I thought it would be wonderful. I think without loss of parking, perhaps that could be an equal spot. But I know that was a frustration. And in this sense, part of my thought was there's no loss of parking.
Mm-hmm. Is that portion of the building there with the sign on the side of it, is that the existing elevator stairway, or is that a new?
It is. The sign's not there. It's that these are again, architects enjoy creating things.
Okay, it's going to take me some time to actually digest some of these things. This is the first time I've seen this rendering.
For sure, and I'd be happy to walk anybody through again. We hosted some council members already, even if it was kind of chilly and late in the day. But we'd be happy to host again. What I'd most like is for people to go and say, yes, I see it, or no, I don't see it, and really, draw your conclusion there.
Right. Okay, I'll work through the treasurer, assistant city manager, and try and schedule a time to get down there and make it more meaningful.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Kinley, we appreciate you being so flexible and accommodating. I'd ask that the assistant or the deputy city manager, city treasurer, perhaps follow up with the entirety of council. I found the on-site visit to be very advantageous, and I would highly recommend that everybody afford themselves that opportunity before we develop consensus on this issue. So thank you. Please, go ahead.
If I may, I appreciate everyone's comments tonight. One of the things that Deputy City Manager Cole and I are looking for specifically are the parameters against which to weigh the options that are in front of us right now. I have heard a number of things, but please, if there are specific criteria that you're looking for us to analyze or compare options, and I see we have three options: the first property that doesn't remove parking, with the building where we already designed to previously open to this. Certainly all combination of those would be as well, but the immediate question in front of us, those are the three options. So please let us know if we have the criteria that we want to see us weighing those options against.
Very good. Anything else, Mr. Seal? Okay. Councilmember Lesh, any comments or questions for the petitioner or for staff?
Fortunately, I was able to go down with Mayor Pro Tem Dillon and Assistant City Manager Cole. And, I have, living downtown, I walk downtown frequently. And, the one thing I've noticed being downtown so much lately is that Saline Main Street has been doing a wonderful job in getting people downtown. And that lot number 1 is packed every night now. It's incredible the amount of people that are parking in that lot. So I do feel that the loss of parking would be kind of a game stopper in that area. That said, when we were visiting this area down here, it was the middle of the day, a lot of traffic on Michigan Avenue, fair amount of traffic on Ann Arbor Saline Road. very peaceful. It's the same reason why my wife and I like to go out and have dinner over at Max, because it's a nice, peaceful venue. And I think that's a lot of what this piece of property brings to the table. You know, again, as all of my colleagues have mentioned, you know, it's not the best time in the world with the sewage treatment plant renovation and everything for having liquid money in the city. But I see this as a great possibility as a venue for the city. So thanks for presenting it.
Very good. Any additional comments or questions from council before we transition to subsequent portions of our agenda? Mayor Pro Tem Dillon.
Thank you. Just to clarify, I love the idea of having a public space, and I wish we could do it on all four corners, so there
Yes.
would be pocket areas on all four corners.
That'd be
I do
great.
love that idea. My concerns are more about just control of the space and the
Certainly.
dollars involved.
Certainly.
That's really what it comes down to, is understanding how that space would be utilized. That, and I don't like that there's so much concrete. Well, we talked about that already. That I think more green, open space, let people use their imaginations with it a little bit more. But I think it would be a great asset to our community. It is a bit hidden, being off, you know, it's sort of like one of those local secrets. I mean, people would eventually find it, but we don't really have a lot of options. We have publicly viewable spaces for public, you know, areas like this. So I mean, I always say, I'm not a no, I'm just, you gotta get me to a yes. So we've got to kind of, I think there are definitely a lot of details that we'd have to work through. When I look at some of the initial drawings and understanding the flow of how you're gonna get people, and one of the topics that we talked about is that understanding that this is going to sort of dead end into a parking lot, and understand that there's gonna be cars going through there, and it's not the confines of a city park that has a sidewalk or a border around it. So understanding that we have to make sure that safety is a big concern as you're looking at things too. Because you still have on the side of cobblestone roads, that's still an active roadway there too. And so there's a lot of moving pieces. I'm hoping that we can kind of find some way to kind of enhance our downtown, and if this is a part of it, all the better.
Yeah, and just to clarify, this plan should not be taken as in any way the final plan. And we showed the blank space because it has yet to be finalized, and we'd like to deliver something that has the amenities that the city's looking for. And at the same time, we'd hope to create a place, you know, speaking to Councilmember Gearbaugh, that benefits everybody. That's the hope.
Any additional questions or comments for our guest? Mr. Kinley, again, thank you for the time. Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
We appreciate the time and effort that you put into this. We also thank the guests, some of our guests who are here this evening to observe the presentation, and particularly to those associated with Saline Main Street or business and property owners downtown. We welcome your thoughts and feedback regarding this proposal and the other proposal for a downtown gathering space in the adjacent lot across Ann Arbor Street. So if you have thoughts, questions, concerns, we would welcome those. Anything else you'd like to add before?
No, thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
A comment for staff, and I don't mean to be pugilistic at 8:45 on a Monday. These presentations, this was too long this evening. And I bear some responsibility because I prepped the agenda, and when I make a mistake, I try to acknowledge it. In future years, if we can get the audit presentation in November, and I think Green Thumb in the past has been much earlier in the season, if we could shoot for the tail end of summer, beginning of fall, that would be ideal. These were some really substantive issues, and they were good discussions, good comments, good questions, but the presentation of a council agenda shouldn't take roughly 2 hours. So again, I'm not trying to be pugilistic or argumentative. I'm not that grumpy this evening, but I did want to make that statement for the record. If there are no additional comments or questions pertaining to our presentations, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion.
Can we remove 24-227 for discussion?
Did you share that, your concerns or questions with staff in advance of tonight's?
I have not.
Okay.
I did not realize that it was my apologies. I did not realize it was under consent.
24-227. Well, actually, it was moved by Dillon, seconded by Gearbaugh. You okay being the second, Mr. Gearbaugh? Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. So that item will be the second to last item then under new business. We start with new business item 24-224, special land use for 1400 East Michigan Ave. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from Community Development Director Adkins and to adopt or not to adopt the special land use for 1400 East Michigan Avenue. Is there a motion?
Move to acknowledge and adopt.
Moved by Gearbaugh to acknowledge and adopt. Was that a second by Seal or Lesh? Seal, thank you, sir. Community Development Adkin, thank you for your patience this evening. Do you care to make some obligatory comments for the public record? Why don't you, you can borrow from Councilmember Lesh. Just pass it back.
Yeah, I'd just like to clarify that this is an amendment to an existing special land use that was approved about 18 to 24 months ago, I believe. They're just expanding the existing indoor storage area to occupy about 90% of the space available to remove the warehousing. There's not going to be any exterior modifications, be it to the building or to the site itself. This is all interior work.
Very good. Councilmember Gearbaugh is the liaison to the Planning Commission. Any comment you'd like to make for the public record on behalf of that body?
No, the board unanimously passed it. This is supporting another continued use that's there, and it's a good fit for that property, and we look forward to them expanding it.
Very good. Are there questions from the dais? Any discussion on the motion? It's been properly moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by CO to acknowledge and to adopt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 24-225, a rezoning of 6971 North Maple Road. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from Community Development Director Adkin and to adopt or not to adopt the recommendation to rezone 6971 North Maple Road. Moved by Dillon, simply to acknowledge. Is there a second? Seconded by Gearbaugh. Again, Mr. Adkin, I would defer to you to make some obligatory comments for the public record.
Yeah, this is part of the 5 parcels that were annexed into the city from Pittsfield Township. This is the last remaining one. There is a potential development on the line, not on the line, but they've submitted some plans. When it was in Pittsfield, it was zoned ag. City doesn't have an agricultural designation. The I-2 zoning designation is best fit for that area. It's surrounded by I-2 with the exception of property west of North Maple Road.
Very good. Again, Mr. Gearbaugh is the representative of the Planning Commission. Any comment you'd like to make at this time at the behest of planning?
It's appropriate that we move it into I-2. It's surrounded by that. I believe the city manager could even mention that there are some issues with water connection and so forth. The home currently is used as potentially residential, but moving forward, it either would have to be changed to be used as some kind of office space. And then, other than that, this is a correct moving forward of at least putting this into the proper category for the property that surrounds it.
Care to make any comment to that point, Ms. O'Toole?
Just as that is an item that will be discussed at Planning Commission, something I heard with our engineering consultants with on forms for after start, so I didn't expect we'll have a resolution and see that as part of their response to the file.
Very good. Questions or comments from the dais? Mayor Pro Tem Dillon.
Thank you. The reason that I move to acknowledge, I think, is based on the questions that have been asked so far, which is that this is a property that has a well and septic on it. So are they going to be required as part of this change in use to then hook into our water and sewer system?
So yes, it's part of the final site plan approval, which is not what we're discussing tonight. This is something that's been on the building board. They will be required to do so. I will note, typically, this is a process we've already completed by this point. It was just because of the timing of annexation, the purchaser of the property did not have full vision yet of what they wanted to do with their development. So we did not do the zoning designation at the time of annexation, which is our normal process.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Gearbaugh.
Sorry, Manager O'Toole. Talking about the well, should this property not continue through a final site plan and review, what will happen with that well and septic field? It will still be allowed to be used until such time as the property's changed for a different use?
So I have to get a official legal opinion on that, but at this point, we don't allow the use of private well or septic, so it is non-compliant.
So in the future, should it not be done within a certain, we would be able to proceed with? No, that's helpful to know, just that going forward, that will not be a situation that we happen with other annexations. Thank you.
Any additional comments or questions from the dais? Then we have a motion on the floor, moved by Dillon, seconded by Gearboss, simply to acknowledge receipt of the memo from our Community Development Director. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to adopt or not to adopt the recommendation to rezone 6971 North Maple Road? Moved by Dillon to adopt. Is there a second? Seconded by Lesh. Is there any additional discussion? There appears to be none. Then we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion to adopt, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 24-223, 2025 water and sewer rates. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from City Treasurer Cole and to adopt or not to adopt resolution number 24-223. Go ahead. Acknowledge and to adopt. Okay, thank you, Councilmember Harmount. Is there a second to that motion? Oh, you just want to acknowledge, excuse me, I'm sorry. Okay, it's been moved by Harmont, seconded, or by whom to acknowledge? You'll acknowledge, okay. Again, I would defer to the city treasurer if you'd like to make comment. Do you want to pass the microphone down? Is that one good? Speaking of that one. No. Well, why don't you, if you have, we can easily pass down the microphone that Mr. Lesh has in front of him.
All right, forgive the disruption.
Much better.
While I know that rate adjustments are never fun, I just want to thank all of you for making the hard choice to do the right thing so that this city does remain solvent and has its ability to pay its debt with ease, which we should be able to do if we plan ahead for it. But rates are certainly something that we never take lightly. We pay an outside consultant to evaluate our rates very specifically because it's very complicated and it's a complex calculation on many different levels. So I thank you for taking the time and considering the rate increase over these past 2 weeks.
Very good. And there was a formal presentation on this matter 2 weeks ago, but the chair would be delighted to entertain any additional questions that you may have. Are there any questions for staff at this time? I think we're going to start with CO and then move to Mayor Pro Tem Dillon.
Could you refresh my memory? What was the recommended increase from the consultants?
Sure. It was 6.5% for water and 7.5% for sewer.
Or it was as proposed here?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Dillon?
Thank you. My concern lies with the special districts. And are we making too much of an assumption with that? And so kind of understanding, do we need to start with, even as much as I hate to say it out loud, a higher rate till we understand that we can establish these special districts? I'm sorry, I keep wanting to say social districts.
I know, right?
And so just to understand that, because, you know, we don't know what's going to happen. We've put a lot of assumptions in that we're going to have X amount of building done within our property lines now, within our area, and then also that we are going to acquire property from outside of the city and then have, you know, contractors, or excuse me, developers then agree to pay. And it just seems like it's a lot of speculation at a time of a lot of uncertainty in our country.
So the one thing I'll say is I don't mean for the special districts to be a distraction to the broader rate study conversation. And if you look at how we analyzed rates, we did not include or project out ongoing income from connection charges outside of really the most immediate future. And that's intentional, precisely for the reasons that you outlined. because there is so much uncertainty around our economic climate moving forward, and frankly, because interest rates have been so high for such a protracted period, you really have to start to wonder how sustainable is this. So to that end, we feel very confident that 7.5% and 6.5% gets us where we need to be to operate the system that we have today, maintain the system that we have today, and meet the needs of our existing users. And that's really why you create those special districts, is precisely because you don't know when or where that development is going to happen, and you need to have a plan in place, triggers in place that are assigned to dollar figures so that we're not behind the times. I mean, that's really where we've gotten ourselves into trouble historically, and where the narrative has shifted the last 2 to 3 years, is that historically the city has prioritized low rates to serve the immediate needs of its existing residents, and in doing so, continue to grow without a plan for how to pay for that growth while also maintaining the existing system. Separating these two out, at least to me, makes the most sense because it allows us to look holistically at growth without having to sacrifice the existing needs of the system.
Thank you very much.
Hold tight, Mr. Seal, in the event that some other council members have questions first. I'll jump to Councilmember Harmount, then to Mr. Gearbaugh, and then back to you, Mr. Seal.
Can you remind us again when we received the last rate increases and how much they were? What percentage they were?
The last rate increases for sewer was 8% and for water was 5%. Those took effect January 1st of last year.
And what was it? What was it the year before that?
It was 50% for water and, 50% for sewer and 25% for water, I believe, which took place on July 1st of 2022.
Yeah, we went 18 months without a rate increase after that first one, after the first major jump.
Okay, and you said 50% increase? Okay. Yeah, so.
That was in 2022.
Okay, so I just want to make a couple comments. So thank you so much for the information we requested last time to have analysis of the surrounding communities and year-over-year rate increase and how those separated out by water and sewer to see how those compared against other surrounding communities. And, while our water rates were really in line with some of the surrounding communities, our sewer rates were between 20 and 40% higher than 80% of the communities that were on that list. I have a hard time agreeing with another huge, big increase that is going to impact the residents of Saline. I've seen my water and sewer bill, and I based on what we've heard here today, it does sound like there's some opportunity with that debt obligation to pull from some of these other buckets. We talked about the different buckets for general fund and the different buckets to possibly. It did look like those were balancing out, though, unless I misunderstood something.
No, you'd have to look at the debt line associated with the repayment of the bond issue. I believe it peaks at about 4.1 million is our total debt obligation by like 28 or 29.
Any additional questions, comments, Councilmember Harmount?
I do not.
Okay, Mr. Gearbaugh, then we'll jump back to Mr. Seal, excuse me.
Just to clarify, when I was mentioning using general fund dollars, I want it set aside for the idea that we should have a short on that payment. Because when you look at our cash flows for those out years, if we don't have the intended growth in there, or should something happen where Lair Farms doesn't go, some of those other aspects, or should our water, because we're subject to a very high demanding single customer, should something in that situation happen, I want to make sure we can make that debt service in a small window. So I agree with you that you can't make an ongoing payment out of general funds to support it, but it's an issue that we talked about, potential capital cost overruns or something that, as a result, needs to happen. But my question on this one, I went back and looked at the last water rate study that was done in November of 2023, and looking at that, we had projected forward 5% increases, so now we're looking at 6.5% increases. It appears there's significant more debt service that was issued in this year than what was projected in the rate study last year. And I'm trying to understand, it was approximately $9 million more, because now we're at like 104, and we were using 95. What was that? I'm not sure why that wasn't in, when we had the projections moving forward, was that a new expenditure, something else that we projected?
So the debt that was issued in 2024 this year was for LTGO, limited term capital obligation bonds. And those were issued for various reasons, but also to finish up some of the projects that we had started that we needed to cash flow for.
Okay, so that was for other projects that we were working on, not necessarily the wastewater treatment plant in itself. Right?
Correct.
And then the other one, looking at just the operating costs, my concern is that looking at a 23 to this new rate study, we had a significant increase in the water fund, approximately, I thought I saw $900,000 expenditures in the base year, and then we had a $150,000 increase in the base year. And the reason why I'm asking you this is if those kind of increases are going to happen just within a year in terms of operating costs, this rate does not appear to be significant enough to offset that kind of growth. Do we have in our numbers effective that we're not going to see another jump of like a $300,000 or $400,000? I couldn't understand why we went from 1 year of a projection that significantly to a higher number in 2024 without understanding that that's going to be a recurring cost every single year now?
So I would say, I mean, the test year is always a more conservative scenario of what can occur. There are a few things going on here. One, especially in the sewer fund, we have been experiencing an inordinate amount of maintenance needs as we're caring for equipment that is obviously beyond its intended life cycle. That's why we're going through the replacement process. But we're operating the plant at the same time that we're going through the replacement process. I believe, and in speaking with Superintendent Briggs, those costs are likely to decrease in the future, or at least level out for us, simply because we'll have new processes in place that are much easier to maintain and less directly costly to us to do so.
Will we do another study next year to tweak the
Yes.
same thing?
Yes.
Because that's where I'm at. I'm seeing that we keep projecting, we were saying 5%, now we're saying 6.5%. I'm concerned that next year it could be 9 or 10% increases. It's looking at what should we be doing now, and should we be planning on a 7% increase versus the 6.5% increase for next year?
I feel Treasurer Cole and myself are probably two of the more fiscally conservative leaders in our roles that you'll find. So very confident in the numbers that we're presenting today to meet next year's obligations, and more hopeful for kind of future years' conversations on this subject, simply because of the timing and the sequencing of certain maintenance needs at these facilities.
Because for me, myself, I was hesitant in approving these, not knowing that, and seeing the negative cash flows and things, and actually a different number than what was presented in our rate study than what was presented at the audit. They were talking 1.5, I think we're talking like 1.3 or something in the rate study. It's a little different.
Yeah, and that's
I
just because of
suspect
the
it's
timing of the
when they
audit.
did
Yeah.
that, so, just making sure the numbers aligned. But for me, that is, again, my concern is that I know we need to worry about water rates and everything, but I'm more concerned that we can't make that debt payment, which would be a bigger concern for this community.
Yeah, and again, I'll note, those debt payments in the future, we did not anticipate any connection charges, revenues from connection charges. So the more growth we get, the better off we are.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. In our last meeting, I indicated I would ask for an illustration of how a special assessment district would be set up. Can you give me a quick overview of how those are done? Physically, how does that all take place?
Sure. I did create like an info fact sheet that went out with my memo 2 weeks ago now, before the holiday. But the basic gist of it is you as a community designate an area where future growth is likely to occur, largely through annexation, and then assign to it through your future modeling what capital needs would be necessary, like a water tower, additional wells, things of that nature. All of those things have a capacity to serve. So you equate the capacity to serve to a residential equivalency unit. The residential equivalency unit is creating one single-family house, and that's the assessed fee for any development. Whether they want to come in and do single-family houses, multifamily houses, you just drill everything down to how many residential equivalency units that creates, and then the fee is assessed in that manner.
Okay, well, what happens if in the midst of that, there's some kind of a recession or economic setback and we built this new water tower or what have you, or built a new whatever belt sewer line, and now we don't have the funds coming in that we thought we might have coming in to help defray the cost?
Well, typically, these things are being entered into as part of a development agreement, so you do have certain legally binding or contractual obligations from the developer. But absolutely, I mean, it's the same thing as connection charges. It's a very delicate game. You constantly have to be monitoring the needs of the system with the growth potential of the system to make sure that you're not overburdening the existing ratepayers with the need to service growth. Michigan's a very unique state in that you as a community really cannot grow and cannot thrive unless you are continuing to grow because of how the state has structured its tax laws and property taxes. I'm not going to sit up here and say that any measure is without risk. It certainly is, but I do think that we have a lot of thought going into how we approach this, and we're certainly taking a different approach than the city has historically.
Okay, thank you.
One thing that I would like to figure into not only our budgeting for the next budget season as we get into that, but also I want to think about this strategically as we talk about rate increases and things like that. With this wastewater treatment plant and continuing construction and infrastructure projects, cost of goods are going to go way up. I mean, we have an administration that is vowing to put in tariffs on anything coming into the United States. We own a product from Canada. We have a huge risk potential when it comes to expenditures over the next 4 years. I would like for you to continue to update council early and often on any of the expenditures for any of the infrastructure projects, anything that we have going on in the next 4 years, so that we can make sure that we are making these decisions out ahead of any of those major shifts. I think when these assessments were all made, we weren't necessarily, I mean, we always factor in some risk, but there's a big risk gap of unknowns right now. So I want to make sure that we're being very conservative, yes, conservative to our ratepayers, but also looking ahead at all of these risks and the cost of goods going up. We don't want to end up in places that cities ended up back in 2008, 2009. Housing market is going to change rapidly. Cost of goods, things of that nature. So I echo my council colleague, Mr. Gearbaugh, in that I want to be very comfortable that these rate increases are going to mine some of those gaps should they come to fruition.
So I will note as a risk mitigation note, the biggest project we have obviously is the wastewater treatment plant rehabilitation project. The unit prices for that are set. They're contractually obligated to us. So we have some relief there that we're not going to have sudden spikes in material costs. And if you've been out by the site lately, there's a lot of materials already on site that they've already purchased and that are waiting. So I feel a little more at ease with that particular project. But absolutely, I mean, this past year, for the first time, I think I finally started to see engineering opinions of costs matching what was coming in on bids. And I do not want to be back where we were 3-4 years ago, post-COVID, where it was anybody's guess what numbers were going to come in at.
Thanks for that.
Additional comments or questions from the dais? Do we have a motion that's moved by Herman, seconded by Seal, to simply acknowledge receipt? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to adopt or not to adopt resolution number 24-223? Okay, Les being the mover to adopt, and Seal being the second. Is there any additional discussion on the motion? Let me just say, I've got kind of a mixed bag on these issues. I want to first motive or integrity of regulators that question their judgment and the practical implication that their decisions or dictates have on business owners and on residents. So wanted to continue to express that concern. I guess I'll leave it at that. Is there any additional questions, comments for this? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries. We move to an agenda item that was removed from the consent agenda at the request of Mayor Pro Tem Dillon. That's 24-227. This will be a motion to approve the renewal contract with you all for custodial services at the same terms and conditions as a current contractual year.
Thank you.
We have a motion.
Oh, sorry.
Moved by Chair Boss, simply to acknowledge receipt. Is there a second?
Second.
Sorry about that, Mayor.
No.
You're up. I need that motion. Go ahead.
So I apologize for not bringing this, I honestly didn't realize it was above the new business line. My questions were that we're continuing services. Did we change our agreement with them? I thought we reduced the number of services that we had at one point. That they were doing less frequent, or there was things like that. That we were looking at changing the services to some degree.
We didn't necessarily change the services, however, we rebid for the cleaning services last year.
Okay. Because this was a two-year contract that we have the option to get an additional year on. So at what point will we rebid it out, the project?
We would rebid the project out, at which point in time we need to find a new vendor or consider other vendors. If this is not approved, we would have to go back and solicit bids.
Right. I guess I thought one of the things that we talked about was bringing things to us sooner, so that if we did want to, I mean, this expires in February, we're kind of right up against the wall now to go back out and get it out. And I'm not saying that there is an issue that we had to, but I thought that we were going to start reviewing contracts a little bit more closely.
So again, this contract had a 1-year renewal. They're renewing at the exact same terms, no increase in cost. We've been satisfied with their service. It does not seem like something we need to rebid at this time. They were the most competitive bidder a year ago by a fair amount. And at this point, we have no reason to believe going out to market would produce any better results.
And then looking at what they do, I mean, it's very extensive. Is there somebody that actually ensures that they're doing all of these things?
Yes, each facility has a contact, and then the contract itself has a staff member that's assigned to overseeing that, and that's Purchasing Manager Ritchie.
Okay, because, I mean, for just an example of something, the conference room hasn't been dusted, the bookshelves haven't been dusted in at least 6 months. And I mean, it's almost embarrassing when we bring people in there. I think that they do a great job on other things. I also don't really like that they start early with vacuuming at like 5 p.m. when people are still here working and they're on the phone. So if we could look at that, I think that our bathrooms are stellar in comparison to what they were in the past, so I really appreciate that. But there's just things in here that I'm like, do we know that somebody's actually doing any of these things and checking them? So I appreciate that there is a contact of, you know, somebody within staff that's doing that. But if we can just make sure that what needs to be done is being done.
Yeah, and I would just say if any council members see something, please just forward the request to Purchasing Manager Ritchie. And she has a little log. She'll be happy to add it to their next rounds.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Additional questions from staff? Okay, we have a motion on the floor, just to acknowledge receipt that was moved by Gearboss, seconded by Dillon. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Is there a motion now that was passed by the? Thank you, Mr. Gearboss. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we begin by Gearboss, seconded by Dillon. Is there any additional discussion on the motion to approve the renewal? Here to be none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to the last enumerated new business item, which is file number 5, backup generator. This is an item that was added at the 11th hour per the city manager's request. This is the motion to now proceed to announce the city manager of approve or not to approve the purchase of a Cummins 200 kW generator in the amount of $67,000 to authorize, not authorize the city treasurer to amend line item 591-555-972-000. Moved by Gearboss to acknowledge, approve, and to authorize. Is there a second? Seconded by Weiss. Lieutenant Acting Mr. CO. City Manager O'Toole, some brief comments for the public record?
Certainly. So this is in direct response to a small fire that broke out at Well House 5-6 in the generator room. I will note that generator is original to the building, so approximately 25 years old. We certainly got our life expectancy out of the unit. And unfortunately, because of how it failed on us, we need to immediately replace it. Rest assured, we do have a temporary solution currently in place that is, there in the event of emergency if we lose power to the facility. But right now that requires manual operation, and it can only operate one pump at a time because it's not as large as we would need otherwise for the facility.
Primarily for the public's benefit, can you comment a little bit on the fire, because I'm sure that may cause some alarm and consternation, and I want to make sure the public that
Yes. The fire was contained to the generator room itself. Really, the only equipment that was impacted was the generator. There's no issues with the alarm systems. There's no issues with the pump. There's no issues with the physical building. Extremely quick response time by the Saline Fire Department and by our own staff to ensure that was immediately dealt with and the appropriate systems were tested. All of our alarms worked. We got out there very quickly. And like I said, we have no reason to believe that there's anything else happening inside of the well house other than the need to now replace this generator.
Very good. Okay. Anything else? I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No.
You good? Okay. Questions or comments for the city manager, Mr. Gearbaugh, Councilmember Gearbaugh? I'm sorry.
Will this be covered by insurance?
That is the question I do not have the answer to yet. So insurance has not completed their investigation. We don't know the exact cause. So at this time, we are asking for you to assume that this would be a use of fund balance. Obviously, if we can get any part or all of this reimbursed through insurance, we are making that effort.
Be ahead of that. Thank you. And then just one other question. Do we have any other generators at that age approach that we need to do immediate repairs or evaluations?
So some of our pump stations didn't even have on-site generators until we did this pump station modernization project. The one thing I will note is that was the one generator in our system that was really on the cusp of, is it time to replace it or not? And unfortunately, it just told us it was time to replace it. So no, at this time, I don't have any immediate concerns about other generators in the system. We did have some that went in as part of that modernization project. And just so you all know, we have a contract for generator maintenance, a third-party contract, specialized contract for generator maintenance that does continuously monitor, these units for age, for wear and tear.
Yeah, I was hoping that we had replaced most of those because I know we added additionals at lift stations and all that other ones. So, okay, thank you.
As part of our asset management group, have we evaluated the mechanics of all of the things that are essential? So emergency backup generators, things like that, so that we know, they're in the red, needs to be replaced immediately, so we can get them into next year's budget, knowing that, this generator was only supposed to last 25 years, and at the 25-year mark, it spontaneously combusted.
Yes. So as part of the water master plan, the sewer master plan, and additional work that's being done specifically at the water plant, obviously we already have the plan for the wastewater plant. We did have OHM looking at the existing age of asset condition, and the consequence of failure. So, what happens if one of these systems failures? And there's recommendations that will arise out of that as part of those models and plans.
Yeah, I think in this upcoming budget season, bringing those things to council would be really helpful so that we can take a look at the age of things and any potential risks of this nature. Because the conversation that I had with Mr. Briggs about a month ago when we approved a higher line item for the building for well number 7, he exclaimed to me that it was an emergency, that if something went down in the wells, we would run out of water in the city. And so this is really close to being an emergency. So things like this, I think, bringing to council during budget season so that we can get folks on track, have these things already pre-approved and ready to rock and roll so that, it doesn't become a true emergency.
Yeah, and I will say, I think we are heading into this upcoming budget season, and more importantly, the capital improvement planning process, with an unprecedented amount of actual data and information that has been lacking so much in past years. We've engaged so much with our engineering consultants to build out our GIS systems, to build out data points for all of these individual asset components, to simply wrap our heads around the assets that we do own. And as I'm sure anyone on our asset subcommittee can tell you, it is a daunting list when you think about everything that the city is physically responsible for maintaining.
So I have a lot more confidence in what this process is going to look like in the future. And, I'm very hopeful that as we continue to move towards changing how we approach maintenance within this system, these conversations become less and less frequent.
Great.
If I may, perhaps even before the normal budget cycle, which begins in the spring of each year, perhaps our asset management team could work with your office and identify a time in the next maybe 30 to 90 days to give an annual presentation in terms of what they've been working on, the discussions they had, and what are some of the key priorities and goals for the ensuing year.
Yeah, I think that will line up nicely with when we anticipate discussing and considering the capital, the 6-year capital plan, which I believe right now we have scheduled for discussions in February and March.
Oh, very good.
Yep.
Yeah, we could aim that a little towards the.
Well, I do have to temper expectations because we are waiting on OHM to finalize the water and sewer master plans, which are really the essential final pieces of data that we need for that planning effort.
Certainly want them to be thorough, but if there's any way that process could be expedited so we can discuss it in February, I think that would be very advantageous for council and for the city. Is there any additional questions, comments regarding this agenda item? No? Okay, then we have any discussion? We have a motion on the floor, then moved by Gearboss, seconded by Rice, to acknowledge, to approve, and to authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We come now to the discussion portion of our agenda. Reports, updates from boards and committees, or other announcements. And again, I'm going to start to my left and end to my right. I believe I need to pass the microphone down.
I don't have any. Thank you.
Very good, Councilman Rice.
We, myself and a couple of others, have developed a new Saline Community Connections Facebook group where the city has access. Many of the businesses and organizations around the city have access, and we will be posting, the most important information that folks need to know so that it doesn't kind of get lost in the algorithms. If you look us up on Facebook, Saline Community Connections, that is where we will be posting things. If you have any interest in joining the group as a business or organization to share information, you are more than welcome. Please feel free to reach out to me. There are some upcoming events coming up. Saline Main Street has a ton of holiday events coming up this upcoming weekend, along with the Chamber with the holiday parade. So check out that event. We're sort of using it as a community bulletin board, if you will. Check out that event space. And then looking forward to getting together with my DEI colleagues. We're going to start really getting our heads into planning out DEI activities and a strategic plan for the coming year that we can tap some of the other boards and commissions with spreading some diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility throughout all of the actions and activities that we do across the community and across the boards and commissions throughout Saline. That's it. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you, Councilman Beardball. Reports and announcements, updates from the board, committee, commission, and
Earlier today, we announced that there will not be a planning commission meeting for the month of December. Those items will be deferred until next year. The taxing boards did meet, LDFA, TIFA, EDC, to basically approve Second Amendment, I think second quarter budget amendments. And then also, we talked about some of the items that are identified as being potential funding sources for projects that may need to be reconsidered, considering what one of our discussions we had tonight is potential major projects and things that probably we take priority over maybe improvements to namely Mill Pond Park or some of those things. And then just to let everyone know, as Councilmember Rice mentioned, this weekend we are also going to have Saline Historical Society's Christmas at the Farm. That'll be from 1 to 4 p.m. Santa and Mrs. Claus will be there. The house will be open and decorated, and we look forward to having individuals there.
Thank you. I've got a few items. I'm not being rude, but how much longer are we going to deal with this microphone issue? Does anybody have an update on that? Say again?
Chris emailed them today to find out they're waiting on 3 parts.
Okay. Again, I prefaced earlier that I'm in a little bit of a mood tonight, apparently. But if there's anything that can be done to expedite the replacement.
They're waiting on parts.
Okay, because this is not good. I'll leave it at that. As it relates to Planning Commission, earlier this evening, and Mr. Adkin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you identified an issue, a stipulation, in statute that would prevent Elle Cole from continuing on as a member of Planning Commission, which is why we accepted her resignation. Is that correct? Okay. And we also have another vacancy on planning because of a recent resignation for personal reasons. I discussed this matter briefly with the city manager and also with Councilmember Gearbaugh, who's our liaison to the Planning Commission. And there's nothing that would prevent us from changing the bylaws of the Planning Commission, thereby modifying the configuration. We currently have 9 members, and it would be my recommendation that we drop down to 7. And from my conversation that I had with the city manager, we're a bit of an outlier in terms of having 9 members. Most municipalities, with the exception of the city of Ann Arbor and Washtenaw County, have 7. So unless there's an objection, what I'd like to consider is an amendment to the bylaws and present that at an upcoming council meeting, unless there's objection. Anything you wanted to add to that, Mr. Gearbaugh?
No, I just think that we need to have a public discussion to make sure everyone understands that we need to have a public discussion on it as to why we're moving that route. And I mean, at this point, we had 3 representations, one from the city, one from and 2 of us from council. Dropping that 1 staff representation would probably give more of a balance to the individual citizens than the city representation, which would not be a bad thing to do.
Thank you. So obviously this doesn't need action imminently, but if we could get some traction on it, maybe in the next month to 60 days, that would actually align nicely if we could do it around the first of the year when we do our normal boarding commission appointments. The clerk's office, specifically Clerk Royal, has been working diligently to reach out to citizen boarding commission members whose terms are expiring. I want to thank her for her efforts. Terry, or Clerk Royal, perhaps either through your office or the city manager, we could notify council around the close of business Friday what new vacancies what new vacancies have developed in the course of you reaching out to citizens and to citizens who no longer wish to serve after the first of the year, because I'd like all my council colleagues to disseminate through their channels and platforms the vacancies that we have on our boards and commissions. Obviously, we want full boards and commissions. We want people with expertise and passion, and you certainly know people who would be good fits for our various boards, committees, commissions, and task forces. So if that information could be disseminated to council so that we could, my colleagues and I could do some outreach between now and our first meeting in January, which is the 6th, that would be great. And then the final thing, perhaps when Councilmember Lesh is done with his announcements, because I don't want to steal any of her thunder, because she's the one who's actually done the work, but the deputy city manager, city treasurer, has been working hard with some of our regional stakeholders to plan our annual small business summit. So perhaps when Councilmember Lesh has concluded his remarks, you can do a little bit of messaging on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any committee reports, but one quick announcement. With the upcoming holiday parade, I just wanted to mention that the parade has changed their policy and that there is no candy throwing this year. That candy has to be handed to people on the sides. And this is really a safety issue. They really don't want the kids coming out into the street when the vehicles are passing by. And so if residents and people that are attending the parade can help the parade by just making sure that you have control and an eye on all of the children that are at the parade to make sure that they are not going into the roadway. There will be candy available, but people will be walking the edge of the parade to hand it out. We don't want kids in the roadway.
Very good. Thank you for sharing that. Councilor Rocio, reports, other announcements, or updates from any boards, commissions, or committees?
Thank you, Your Honor. Last week, the week before, on Wednesday night, we had the Environmental Commission meeting. We talked about what we are doing. I relayed to them council's wishes for a recommendation for what to do about ensuring that we get compostables with the vendors that come to our events. And we are going to work on that and bring forward another recommendation shortly. That's all I have.
Very good. Councilmember Lesh.
Just wanted to thank Deputy City Manager Cole for coming to the Arts and Culture and enlightening the committee on city fiscal responsibility.
Very good. Deputy City Manager Cole, do you want to do a little bit of messaging on the upcoming Small Business Summit, which is our annual event geared towards our smaller entrepreneurs?
Thank you so much. Yes, on December 12th from 11:30 to 1 p.m. here at City Hall, we'll be hosting the Small Business Summit. We have Speaker Richard Sheridan, who is the author of Joy Incorporated. So if you want to come and figure out some ways to be happy and create that in your small business, this is for you. The event is free. You can RSVP at salinechamber.org.
Very good. It will be hosted here, and it's for any small business operator in the Saline community or anybody who is interested in starting a small enterprise in Saline. We would welcome those individuals to attend as well. Do you have some announcements, Rick?
Well, I have the next item.
Oh, excuse me. Okay, well, unless there are additional reports, announcements, or updates from committees or commissions, City Manager O'Toole, if you'd like to briefly message on our upcoming Saline River Dam Town Hall, which is scheduled for a week from today, next Monday.
That's really all I wanted to share at this particular meeting is a plug again. We have the town hall scheduled for December 9th, 6 p.m. here in council chambers. Again, the presentation will not make a specific recommendation on the future of the dam, but rather outline what is feasible both for removal or continued existence of the dam. So please welcome anyone to attend. We'll be hopefully streaming that and taking questions online as well as in person.
Very good. Yep. So just to confirm, if you're unable to be here in person, you can watch live on YouTube, and we will do our best to entertain your questions and comments and articulate those to staff and to our consultants who will also be present. Is that correct?
Correct.
Very good. Are there questions, comments for the city manager regarding next Monday's town hall? Ms. Dillon?
Thank you. Just because I've had people ask, the dam study, is it available to the public, and when will it be?
It will not be completed. So again, this is the public engagement phase of the study. So the study is not completed until we conclude this in public engagement phase. So likely towards the end of this year. The presentation will be available to the public once that's completed, however. And we are working on like a simple one-pager. We've got the front side, which is the timeline. We'll have some summary data for the presentation handout at that meeting.
Thank you very much.
And when will it be provided to council so that we can review it?
Are you talking about the presentation or the study? The study would likely be concluded by the end of this calendar year. So at this point, probably the first meeting in January.
Okay. I'm going to raise my concerns once more that we're going to host a town hall that council can't really provide any additional information for. So I would like that point to be made during the town hall that we are also hearing the information that they are hearing, and that council has no additional insight at this point, so that our constituency understands that we can't really say one way or the other the way that we would like to see it go because we don't have any information. I just want to make that point.
So I appreciate that point, but staff here is responding to direction from council to have increased public engagement related to this feasibility study. So if you did not want public engagement to have occurred, that was not the direction staff received.
We are not saying we don't want public engagement. We want public engagement, but we want to be as informed as staff whilst doing said public engagement, so that we don't come off as the knuckleheads who don't know what's going on.
And again, there's no, staff does not have a recommendation. Staff, the presentation isn't final. Our consultant engineers are completing that work.
So is this not premature then to have this conversation with the city, with the citizens?
So we're presenting what is feasible and gathering public input to make a part of the final study. It's the same process we followed for the downtown district. We presented what was feasible, we gathered input, we finalized the study. It's the same process we went through for the master plan. We presented the city's concept for things, we gathered input, we finalized the study. This is a pretty normal process for us.
Okay.
The presentation of PowerPoint which will be shared next Monday, when will that be prepared?
As soon as that's not final yet, but as soon as that's prepared, I'm happy to share it with council, and that was our intent.
I would assume
Yes.
the town hall is Monday, that the PowerPoint presentation.
Very soon, yes.
In the next 48 hours.
Yes.
As soon as that is finalized, I think disseminate that.
Yes,
immediately.
absolutely. That's the intent. And as I said, we'll have a handout for that presentation that evening as well. That will all be shared with you prior to the.
So when we're talking about what the public is going to have for this town hall, and we're talking about feasibility, are we going to be talking about the risk comparison between disposal or decommissioning versus keeping? Are we going to talk about the timing? Are we going to talk about like what specifically is the public going to have to be able to give input on?
The public input process is simply that we will present what is feasible, what would be necessary to maintain the dam, what could occur if the dam was removed. So really the feedback we're gathering at this point is more in relation to, do people generally support maintaining the dam or removing the dam? And if removing the dam, what sort of public amenity features will we need to consider in that? So that when council makes a determination, you have the public input before you consider what options we want to pursue further.
So risk will be one of those as far as the comparison and contrast.
There's general pros and cons that will be covered during the presentation, but in terms of like a deep dive on risk, that would come at council's direction for which options you want us to look more deeply into.
I just think it's kind of the cart before the horse. It's kind of hard to get soliciting input if we don't give them enough information to be able to provide their input with and understanding costs just from a high level. Like
It will cover costs, and it will cover general parameters for, there will be renderings available for individuals to review the basic features. But again, we're trying to solicit public input to finish the study so that we have those comments, just like we have with past surveys, we have those comments to then inform what the final course of action would be, which is really bringing this to council and then having a debate that looks at risk, that looks at costs, that looks at what's available to us. I mean, realistically, we are so far ahead of the curve in terms of what decisions need to be made. There's no imminent structural issues with the dam. This can be a conversation that we take our time with and that we do deep dives on.
One more quick question is then, so we're soliciting feedback from the public. Will that feedback then be presented when you present the sort of final recommendations to council? You'll say public feedback.
Yeah, so there'll be
such and such.
Yes, the idea would be that we'd gather general input and summarize them into common themes or comments or community input section within the study.
Yeah, see, and I think where my frustration is coming in and where I'm getting a little confused is when we do things like master plan, community input, we do things like, the parks plan, community input. We do it in a bunch of different ways, right? We don't just have one town hall and check a box. We do like surveys and we do things like that. So my hesitancy to have one town hall meeting with overly broad information to solicit feedback from the community and then take that feedback in and then eventually present it to council with recommendations, it feels a little like pacification on the community. It feels a little bit like we're saying like, oh, we held a town hall and we solicited your feedback, but like.
So I think you're not anticipating what this town hall will entail. It is not overly broad. That is the point of the town hall. It's going to be very specific, and why a survey or simple community messaging would fall flat. There's really no way to ask survey questions of something that's highly technical in nature. We've got 3 specialists, engineering specialists, who will be attending this meeting. People who are specialists in river restoration, design, people who have removed and reinstalled rivers in the past. We have an environmental specialist, so not an overly broad presentation in the least bit. In fact, the biggest challenge for us is trying to streamline that into a publicly digestible way, simply because we want to solicit good feedback on what is feasible.
Do you see where these questions are coming from, though? Council has not seen this nor heard who's going to be presenting or any of those things. So just taking your word for it, like it's fine, this is the way we do it, is one thing. But if you showed us something, I wouldn't have these questions. So that's all I'm getting.
At this point, we don't have anything yet to show. The study isn't final. The presentation is filed. As soon as those materials are final, council will be given them.
It's the Monday before the Monday that you're going to be presenting these things. This is the point I'm trying to make, is we don't have this information. We don't know what you're going to be talking about. That is not the way that council should be treated in respect to information that's going to go out to the community, because then we just become members of the community and can't can't get a feel for things before that town hall, because when we leave that town hall, folks in the community are going to ask us questions, and it's pretty close to the first time we've heard those answers. That's all I'm trying to say here, is that giving council the appropriate amount of information. So ideally, we would have had this presentation last week, and tonight we could be asking questions, or maybe asking the city manager, hey, you know, we saw in this presentation that you're going to give next week, maybe if you could add this additional bit of information. But what we're going to get is Wednesday or Thursday of this week, and then have like a 24-hour time turnaround to say, hey, can you add this information here? Hey, can you explain this to us? That's all I'm trying to say. The timing of this feels crunchy and rushed.
I don't feel from conversations with Engineer Humphreys that anything is being rushed. Our consultants have put a lot of time and effort into presenting something that is comprehensive and will be reasonably interpreted by the average citizen so that they can provide their feedback based on real circumstances and real scenarios.
And I believe you, and I trust you, and I hear what you're saying. Council's not privy to any of that. That's all I'm saying.
To me, that just gets back to operations. I mean, we don't send you guys a copy of our surveys before they
This
go out
is not
to the
operations.
community.
This is community connection. This is talking to our constituency about something that is going to be a hot issue in this community.
And I guess my talking point to you all again would be, everyone temper your energy around this. No imminent decision needs to be made. This is the very, very beginning of the conversation. The city, unlike in the past, is well ahead of the curve in terms of how we have this conversation. We are in complete control of the narrative about what the future holds for the Saline River and the Saline River Dam.
Yes, I appreciate that.
There's nothing that would prevent this body of the city subsequent next Monday have scheduled additional town halls.
Absolutely. This is simply to complete the study process.
I would be happy to participate in lead that effort. As a matter of fact, I'll make sure that this item is a discussion item in our subcommittee so we can debrief on the town hall and talk about what the appropriate next steps are. There are additional items that
No, you're.
Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, would you like to go ahead and finish your point?
Thank you. Just kind of closing the loop on this, just so I understand, because what I heard you explain was we've got river restorations, environmentalists, and things like that. So are we presenting what it's going to look like without the dam? Are we presenting what it will be to restore the dam? Are we showing all aspects of the feasibility of what we can do now, what we can do in the future, what it would look like without it?
Yes, we will have renderings of what it would look like without the dam. And I will temper that by saying this is just what our consultant engineers have created as a rendering. It does not yet include community feedback, which would be essential to any sort of final renderings.
But part of the conversation at the town hall will be maintaining the dam.
Yes, correct. That is option one. Maintain the existing dam. What does that entail? The cost expectations with that over a nearly 50-year life cycle.
Thank you. I just want to clarify to people that this isn't, we're going to show you what it looks like without a dam.
Correct. Yep.
Additional comments today. Okay, thank you very much. If there are no additional discussion items, we will proceed to the second public comment period. Under the Open Meetings Act, a person may come forward at this time, make comment or questions to the city council. The public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested, but of course not required to state your name and address to the record. Are there any citizen comments this evening? Please.
Hello, Tran Longmore, 325 North Lewis Street. I want to thank Colleen O'Toole, City Manager. I've attended a lot of government town halls that come off a little bit like a dog and pony show, but the decision's already been made by the council members and everybody else. So it's refreshing to understand that we're all in here. We're all learning at the same time, and there's nothing wrong with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments, Mr. Longmore. Any additional citizen comments? Yeah, please.
Good evening, James Peters, 509 Springbrook. Getting late, so I'll be quick. Oh, by the way, my vote would be for this. I really like this location prior then to the one by the candy store. I think this is going to be great. Okay, on the dam and how the city is trending. We've already lost our hospital We've already lost our police dispatch, and we're talking about losing our fire department. Now, to talk about losing this historic Henry Ford Dam and destroying the very beautiful, most popular park we have behind it, it's just inconceivable we're even talking about this. If the dam's in fair condition, fix the dam and keep it. I think it's a simple decision, really. That's it. It's getting late, so I could talk about this for an hour. Thank you.
Hello again, Sal Randazzo, Hickory Lane. I want to go back on the overpopulation of the urban deer issue in Saline. It's been brought up in a meeting before. I think the problem's been identified. It's a rhetorical question. I just wonder when we get to the solution part and then to the implementation and the successful resolution of the deer. I mean, personally, I'm shushing them off of my property almost nightly. Another statement I'd like to just bring up. In the past, we had more local participation from our business community in Saline. I remember way back, I think it was RMB donated a significant portion to building the rec center. And we have multinational corporations within our community, and I just wonder, are they approached or do they come forward to volunteer, that they would be more of a part of the community by donating funds to have a space or something like that. I know I've been to Marysville, Ohio, and Bellefontaine, Ohio, which is neighboring of the Honda manufacturing, and Honda is a big part of the community. The policemen drive Honda cars, and there's a lot of donation that comes from these large corporations that inhabit the cities that they run their businesses from. So I just like to encourage mayor, council, maybe to look in those directions to get additional funds where you don't have to burden the taxpayers for things that you would think that we would all enjoy in the future. Thank you.
Dean Gearbox, 601 South Ann Arbor Street. I'm here to represent my brother and myself, property of 1112 East Michigan Avenue. Tonight we learned of a development that apparently has been in the background for a year or so, and I know that as we talk tonight about having information and making decisions, my interest in that property has been a concern for over 25 years. This potential development, regardless of how it moves forward, does trigger the reverter clause on that property. My biggest concern about this is that when we talk partnership, I have not been involved in this until the last 2 months, and then I was getting information. I don't understand why this was not brought forward, as our staff has spent money and dollars and hours in developing this proposal with this individual. Further, when I look at what of the things that have happened, the separate meetings, violate the OMA violations, council was said and separated 2 different meetings with 3 members of council to avoid having to call a full-blown Open Meetings Act. Further, I don't want to be adverse to this development. I just want to be treated fairly, which my parents were not treated fairly in the past. Eminent domain is again being considered or has been talked about. It has changed. This is primarily a benefit to this individual. We're not taking his property. He wants to continue to own his ownership of it and have $500,000 put onto it and then the property returned to him and continue to make money off of it. I've lost over $1 million on the fact that I had to give up that property and my parents had to sign off. And they did it because members of this community thought that they had more money as a city and could bankrupt them before they could actually defend it. I am not that situation. I will defend this property. But I want to see it done right. I've been approached. There has been some considerations, but I've got nothing in writing. And when we talk about partnerships, just less than 2 months ago, I had him, Tyler Kinley, and his Proxis property move a 2-ton unit over my building without notifying me. This city manager had the city hall evacuated because you could not have this building in here. That's the type of partnership I've been dealing with for 20 years. So when I get upset about this, I am. I just want to be fairly treated and have the right to receive my income as much as he has to receive his. Thank you.
Additional citizen council members in the audience. Then I would refer to city clerk. Were there any written comments provided in advance of tonight's meeting which needed to be formed to remark there at this time? Okay, so we appreciate the comments that were made about our upcoming town hall and the two separate analyses that were done on the dam, one evaluating cost and risk to preserve the asset, and one looking at the removal. I did want to state for the public record, because I think there's been some misinformation, about the future of the fire department. I would encourage anybody to look at that analysis that was approved in our most recent council meeting. Nobody was looking to do away with the City Fire Department, just looking at improved efficiencies and how that service can be elevated and enhanced in the ensuing years to meet the growing demands of the broader Saline community. As it relates to the comments that were made by Mr. Mendez about deer population, I believe the consensus from City Council was to invite representatives from the DNR to present specifically on that issue. Have we gotten any traction on identifying the appropriate individual and securing the time for that individual to speak? Okay, and you're defining spring as March, April? Okay, very good. Well, keep us abreast of that. If it can be done sooner, I think that would be advantageous. And as it relates to constructive engagement of our large business community, it's actually sort of serendipitous or fortuitous that you mentioned that, because I had an individual, the president of a large business in the Saline community, contacted me just a few weeks ago to inquire as to the rendering for downtown gathering space behind Lucky Grill. He was very intrigued by that, and I hope to meet with him in the coming weeks to solicit some of his ideas, and he might be in a position to support that project if council decides to move forward with it. But of course, engaging our business community and finding new ways for them to partner with us to enhance quality of life here in Saline is a priority and will remain a priority in the ensuing years. Again, we appreciate all the comments this evening. If there are no additional items to be considered for discussion, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn this regular council meeting at 9:53 p.m. Moved by Gearlaw, is there a second? Oh boy. Well, the mover, and maybe it was Carmona.